Good evening. Just to kind of give everybody a heads up of my preparation when I do this, typically I like to write this out, type it up, and email it back to somebody from my hometown, somebody I really do trust who reviews my grammar and kind of reviews the context of it, make sure it makes sense. And actually in his review, he actually said, Andrew, it kind of seems like you were repeating yourself a lot of times in this, so if I do sound like I'm repeating myself, I do apologize for that. I was actually wrote about 75% of this in a hotel room last week, so I do apologize if some of it does sound redundant. So I kind of want to talk about a concept I've read about in the book Good to Great. Now I know I've mentioned this book before in one of my devotionals, but there's another concept that I think would be beneficial for everybody to know about. I would like to briefly discuss a triathlon athlete named Dave Scott. So to pretty much just give you a quick background of him, he's won the Hawaii Iron Triathlon 6 times in his career. As part of his daily workout to prepare for all these triathlons, he rides his bike about 75 miles a day, swims 20,000 meters, and runs about another 17 miles and on top of that. Along with a rigorous workout regime that he also has a strict diet he likes to abide by. Part of his diet is that he would consume cottage cheese, but he just wouldn't consume it right off the bat. He would rinse it off before he would consume it, but to remove any potential extra fat there was on it. Now, there was never any evidence that him doing this resulted in success, nor did he ever say, oh yeah, I was so successful because I rinsed off my cottage cheese. Pretty much what this showed was that he was willing to do the small things that it took to be successful. Now, if I were to ask you all tonight, what are you doing right now to better yourselves as a Christian? How big or small would you consider what you're doing? Are you going out on a mission trip? Are you having a Bible study with somebody? Or are you just saying a small prayer before you go to bed every night? Like Dave Scott kind of epitomized, it does not have to be the most noticeable thing or noticeable action. So tonight I have 3 main points I would like to talk about and also connect those to 3 examples of how people in the Bible did small things to better themselves. Or in other words, just kind of like how the book Good to Great mentioned it, how did these people rinse their cottage cheese? My first main point is to give the best effort you can at any given point. Right now I would like to look at Luke chapter 21 verses 1 through 4. Again, that's Luke chapter 21 verses 1 through 4. It says, Jesus looked up and saw the rich putting their gifts into the offering box. And he saw a poor widow put in 2 small copper coins. And he said, truly, I tell you, this poor widow has put in more than all of them. For they all contributed out of their abundance, but she, out of her poverty, put in all she had. Excuse me. This woman could have made excuses. She could have said, all I've got's are these 2 little small pieces of copper. What difference is that going to make? It says she gave what she could, and that's what Jesus noticed out of all the many contributions that were made. Too often in life, one of the things I hear is, I'm not the best at whatever, and as a result, I can't do it. Typically when I hear this, I have two things that run across my mind. First, typically if somebody asks you to do something, they have a certain type of confidence that you're able to do it. And two, maybe you're not good at something because you've never really tried to improve yourself. Well, I'm not good at writing. Well, how often do you practice at writing? Well, I'm not good at running. Well, how often do you go outside, run a mile? Go run a mile every day for 6 months and tell me if you're not any better at it. So that's pretty much sums up my first point. Second main point I would like to discuss is to have faith in what we will do will result in the change we're looking for. So if you would, please turn to Luke chapter 8, verses 43 through 48. A lot of 4s in there. Luke chapter 8, verses 43 through 48. It says, and there was a woman who had a discharge of blood for 12 years, and though she had spent all of her living on physicians, she could not be healed by anyone. She came up behind him and touched him in the fringe of his garment, and immediately her discharge of blood ceased. And Jesus said, who was it that touched me? When all denied it, Peter said, Master, the crowd surround you and are pressing in on you. But Jesus said, someone touched me, for I perceive that the power has gone out from me. And when the woman saw that she was not hidden, she came trembling and falling down before him, declared in the presence of all the people why she had touched him and how she had immediately been healed. And he said to her, "Daughter, your faith has made you well. Go in peace." Now, the reason I picked this one and why it kind of epitomizes the second point, is she recognized there was something that needed to be changed. She believed that if she touched Jesus' garment, she would be healed. And one of the things that stood out to me in the few verses I just read here is, look back at verse 48, what Jesus said to her. He says, "Your faith made you well." Not only did this woman have faith, but she was willing to do what was necessary to create change. I mean, it's obviously it's important to have faith. But as indicated in James chapter 2, verse 17, so also by faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. So the final point I would like to talk about is persistence will show results over time. Persistence is, according to Google, it's amazing what you can find on Google. Persistence is defined as a firm or obstinate continuance in a course of action in spite of difficulty or opposition. Now, that was a lot to take in for me at that time, so pretty much just to simplify it, in theory, in order for persistence to occur, there must be a certain type of trial to take place. While there are a few examples that I think could illustrate this point, I would like to discuss how Jesus demonstrated persistence. In Matthew chapter 4, verses 1 through 11, now I'm not going to read all that just for time's sake, but pretty much what these verses detail is it details how Jesus was tempted. It details no matter what trial came his way, Jesus proved that persistence will trump any obstacle. We saw this when Satan eventually just said, okay, he just left Jesus, and this was shown towards the end of the scriptures. Persistence is needed. Jesus never gave in when he was tempted, and we need to be persistent no matter how big or small the trial may be. So to conclude, I discussed tonight, it takes a kind of a unique discipline to better ourselves as Christians. It kind of takes a certain self-awareness to better ourselves, which if you ask me, those are two qualities I think are very underrated, discipline and self-awareness. Not only to have the discipline to do what's necessary or do what's right, but also to have the self-awareness to recognize certain situations that come up. So as I bring my thoughts to a close tonight, I would like to ask everybody kind of a question. What are you doing each day to become a better Christian? Or as Jim Collins, the author of Good to Great, asked, how are you rinsing your cottage cheese every day? So if you're here tonight and you need the prayers of the church, if you'd like to be baptized, please come forward. Let's together we stand and sing.